I'd been looking forward to Friday all week. After a tough day on the bench, I just wanted to drive home, pour a glass of wine, and finally relax. The courthouse parking lot was nearly empty as I walked to my car, a silver Lexus I'd worked hard for. Keys in hand, I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat, letting out a long sigh as I adjusted my bag on the passenger side. As I started the engine, blue lights flashed behind me. For a split second, I wondered if there'd been an accident, but the police cruiser blocked my exit. A white male officer stepped out briskly, hand resting on his holster, eyes locked on me through the windshield. I lowered my window halfway. He didn't smile. "Ma'am, can you step out of the vehicle, please?" he said, voice tight with suspicion. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. He glanced at the car, then at me. "We received a report about a possible stolen vehicle matching this description," he replied, barely hiding his doubt. I blinked, still gripping my keys. "This is my car. I work at the courthouse." He ignored that, gesturing for me to get out. "Step out, ma'am. Now." A few scattered cars, empty benches, the courthouse steps behind me. Suddenly, the entire place felt colder. I slowly got out, keeping my hands visible, feeling the judge's robe still folded in my bag. He took the keys from my hand, looking over the Lexus with a frown. "Registration and ID," he said sharply. I nodded and reached into my purse, my heart pounding harder than it had during any trial I'd presided over. My hands were steady, but my mind raced. I handed the officer my driver's license and registration, watching him scrutinize each one as if he expected something to be off. He radioed in the license plate, never taking his eyes off me. I stood beside my car in my business suit, feeling every second stretch out. The courthouse security guard, an older man who usually greeted me by name, peeked around the corner, then ducked away at the sight of the police cruiser. The officer finally spoke again. "You say you work at the courthouse?" "Yes, I do," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "What do you do there?" I took a slow breath. "I'm a judge." He paused, one eyebrow raised, like he thought I was making it up. "A judge, huh?" he said. "Can I see some proof of that?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my courthouse ID, holding it out. His expression didn't change, he barely glanced at it. "We're going to need to check a few things," he said, stepping aside and speaking quietly into his radio again, this time giving my name and ID number. Other cars were now passing by the lot, some drivers slowing down, curious. I stood perfectly still, aware of the attention, aware of the weight of the moment. "Is there anything else I can help you with, officer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He shook his head, lips pressed in a thin line. "Just wait right there," he said, "until we sort this out." I looked back at my car, then at the looming courthouse behind me. After years of commanding authority from the bench, it was jarring to be questioned like this in my own parking lot. I stood in the cool evening air, feeling more exposed with every passing minute. The officer paced around my car, occasionally glancing at me, his posture rigid and guarded. A second police cruiser pulled in, lights still flashing. Another officer, a woman this time, stepped out and joined her colleague. They spoke in low tones, glancing my way. I caught fragments: my name, the car, courthouse staff. The first officer returned, holding my ID and registration loosely in one hand. The second officer approached me, softer in her tone. "Ma'am, can you tell me again what brought you here today?" she asked. I kept my answer simple, careful. "I'm finishing work. I'm a judge in this courthouse. This is my car, I drive it every day." She nodded, eyeing my badge and then my face. "We're just trying to clear up some confusion." The vehicle came up in a routine check. I nodded, biting back frustration. "All my documents are current, and I have nothing to hide." The first officer leaned against his car, watching the conversation closely. He still looked skeptical, as if waiting for a slip-up. A few minutes later, the radio on his belt crackled with a response from dispatch. He listened, nodded, and shot a look at his partner. The tension between them was unmistakable. I knew that look. It was the moment they realized the pieces were starting to fit, and not the way they expected. The second officer gave me a polite but hesitant smile. "Thank you for your patience, Judge Williams. We're almost done here." I nodded silently, feeling a mix of relief and lingering disbelief. But the first officer wasn't finished. "Just a few more questions," he insisted, voice sharp, unwilling to let go of his doubts. I straightened, fixing him with the calm authority I used in my courtroom. "I'm happy to answer. But I'd also like to know exactly why you're treating me like a suspect in my own parking lot." He hesitated, suddenly aware of the shift in power. There was a long, awkward silence as the first officer realized the conversation had turned. The courthouse ID still dangled from my hand, my name and title clear for anyone to see. The female officer cleared her throat and took a step back, almost as if to distance herself from her partner's stubbornness. "Judge Williams, we apologize for the inconvenience. Sometimes these situations arise out of a simple error in the system." But her partner wouldn't let it go. "We have to follow protocol, ma'am. We can't just take someone's word for it." His voice was defensive now, but I could see him scanning the surroundings, aware of the courthouse cameras, the lingering security guard, and the slow-moving cars catching the scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Years of authority resonated in every word. "I understand you have a job to do, officer. But I would hope you approach every situation with an open mind, and respect for those you're questioning. Especially when their credentials are right in front of you." His jaw tightened. I could see the struggle on his face, caught between pride and the realization he might have made a serious misjudgment. The female officer spoke up again, her tone conciliatory. "Your documents check out, Judge Williams. There was a false alarm in the system, but everything is clear now. You're free to go." The first officer handed back my registration and ID, his gaze finally dropping. "Sorry for the trouble," he mumbled, but the words sounded forced, like he wasn't used to saying them. I took my paperwork, sliding it calmly back into my bag. For a moment, no one moved. The tension hung in the air, thick and unspoken. Then I stepped forward, meeting the officer's eyes. "I suggest you review your procedures," I said quietly. "Next time, the person you're questioning might not be as patient as I am." With that, I turned and got back into my car, my hands steady on the wheel. Behind me, I saw the officers exchanging glances, uncertain, uncomfortable, and, perhaps, just a little changed by the encounter. I closed my door, but didn't drive off immediately. I watched the officers through the rearview mirror. The second officer returned to their cruiser, but the first lingered, glancing at my car with a mixture of frustration and regret. For a split second, I wondered if he was replaying every word, realizing how close he'd come to crossing a line he couldn't uncross. My phone buzzed with a message from the courthouse clerk. "Everything okay out there? Saw the lights. Need anything?" I typed back, "All good. Just a misunderstanding. I'll be home soon." As I finally pulled away, the courthouse lights fading behind me, I felt a heaviness settle in my chest, a reminder that titles and achievements didn't always shield you from suspicion. But I also knew that holding my ground, calmly and confidently, had made a difference. Maybe not just for me, but for the next person who found themselves in the same place. By the time I reached my street, my heart rate had slowed, and my resolve felt stronger than ever. Monday would come soon enough. The robe would go back on. And if those officers ever ended up in my courtroom, I'd treat them with the fairness and respect I expected from myself. Because true authority, I reminded myself, isn't about the badge or the gavel. It's about how you act when the world assumes the worst, and how you rise above it, every single time. That weekend, the incident replayed in my mind more than I wanted to admit. I found myself scanning the news, half expecting to see a story about it, or at least some chatter on social media. But there was nothing, just another quiet misunderstanding, brushed aside once the truth came out. Monday morning arrived. I dressed with purpose, my judge's robe neatly pressed and my head held high. At the courthouse, familiar faces greeted me warmly, and life seemed to slip back into its normal rhythm. Yet something had shifted. The security guard, who'd looked away during the confrontation, approached me as I entered. "Judge Williams, I should have stepped in on Friday," he said quietly, shame coloring his tone. "Didn't seem right, the way they spoke to you." I met his eyes and gave a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you for saying that. But sometimes it takes seeing things up close to recognize what needs to change. We just keep moving forward." In my chambers, I reviewed the week's cases. The officers' names appeared on my docket as witnesses in a hearing later that month. My mind lingered on the encounter, how quickly suspicion could cloud judgment, and how important it was to remain fair, no matter which side of the bench you stood on. When that hearing finally came, both officers entered the courtroom, shoulders a little stiffer, eyes more careful than before. This time, when they addressed the court, their words were measured, respectful. The memory of that parking lot hung between us, a silent lesson neither of us could forget. As I ruled on the case, I kept my voice steady and impartial, upholding justice for all involved. But as the officers exited, I saw the faintest nod from the female officer. A silent acknowledgement that, perhaps, something had changed for the better, not just for them, but for anyone who might stand in that parking lot after me. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night in the courthouse parking lot lingered, a quiet reminder that life outside the courtroom could test your patience and resolve just as much as any legal case. But I refused to let it harden me. If anything, it made me more determined to stand firm in every situation, no matter how unexpected. One afternoon, after a long day of hearings, I was approached by a young attorney. She was new to the courthouse, her nerves showing as she clutched a stack of papers to her chest. "Judge Williams," she said, hesitating, "I heard about what happened in the parking lot. I just wanted to say, thank you for the way you handled it. People notice. It matters." I smiled, humbled. Sometimes the only way to change things is to show people how it's done, one moment at a time. She nodded, visibly inspired. If I ever find myself in a tough spot, I hope I can be that calm. "Strength isn't about never being shaken," I told her gently. "It's about knowing who you are, even when others don't." That evening, as I left the courthouse again, I noticed both police officers on duty, chatting near their cruiser. This time, when I walked by, the first officer straightened, and, after a long pause, gave me a genuine nod. "Have a good evening, Judge Williams," he said, voice steady but softer than before. "Thank you, officer. You as well." The tension of the past had faded, replaced by something closer to mutual understanding. I got into my car, glanced once more at the courthouse bathed in golden light, and drove home, knowing the world didn't change overnight, but sometimes, it shifted just enough to make the next day a little easier for everyone. Months later, the incident felt like a distant echo, one of many stories woven into the fabric of courthouse life. But its impact remained, subtle and persistent, shaping how I carried myself and how others interacted with me. At a local community event, I found myself speaking on a panel about justice and public trust. The room was filled with young people, local leaders, and a few familiar faces from law enforcement, including both officers from that night. I could feel their eyes on me as I recounted, in broad terms, the importance of treating every person with dignity, regardless of circumstance. "Justice isn't just about what happens in court," I said, scanning the room. "It's about the small moments, the everyday choices to listen, to stay open, and to correct course when needed. Titles can't protect us from being misunderstood, but character can guide us through it." After the discussion, the female officer approached me, gratitude written plainly on her face. "Thank you for what you said, Judge Williams," she offered. "It meant a lot, Not just for the people in this room, but for us, too. We're trying to do better. I nodded, the weight of shared experience hanging between us. That's all anyone can ask. Keep doing your part. As the evening ended, the young attorney from before caught up with me outside. You're making a difference, Judge. People talk about it. Even the officers. I smiled, feeling the ripples of that night long ago. Sometimes, change starts with a single moment, and a choice to stand your ground. Driving home, I realized the real victory wasn't just clearing my name, but opening minds, one conversation at a time. No one was immune to doubt or error, but every day brought another chance to rewrite the story, for myself and for others. The seasons changed, but the lessons from that night never faded. In the courtroom and beyond, I found myself noticing the little things, a respectful greeting from a police officer, a nod from courthouse staff, an extra moment of patience from colleagues and strangers alike. One afternoon, while leaving a community outreach meeting, the first officer, the one who had doubted me most, caught up to me in the parking lot. He hesitated before speaking, his posture humble. Judge Williams, I owe you more than just an apology, he began quietly. That night, I realized I'd been so focused on protocol, I stopped seeing people. Since then, I've tried to do better. It's made me a better officer. I listened, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Thank you for telling me, I replied. It's never too late to grow. He nodded, relief visible on his face. And thank you for handling it with so much grace. It made me think. I just wanted you to know. We shook hands, no tension, no lingering resentment. Just understanding. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, I felt something I hadn't expected, hope. Not just for myself, but for the city I served. I knew there would always be misunderstandings and moments when people saw only what they expected. But I also knew that patience, courage, and integrity could quietly change the world, one encounter at a time. The gavel and the badge each carried weight. But, in the end, it was the choices behind them, the willingness to see each other fully, that defined real justice. And as I closed my front door, I knew I'd continue to stand my ground, in every courtroom, every parking lot, every single day.